This audio is not a mere tale spun from the ether. It is a harrowing warning, a fatal confession from the abyss. If you are listening to this, you have ventured too close to the edge of a reality too terrible to comprehend. I implore you, cease this recording now. If you detect the scent of ozone, or hear a faint, maddening hum that seems to resonate within your very bones, you must turn back. Do not linger upon these words. Yet, I fear it may already be too late for you. For the entity that haunts the pages of the cursed manuscript, that wretched tome I unearthed in the bowels of the waterlogged library, travels by frequencies beyond the grasp of human perception. It seeks to entwine itself with those who dare to listen, like a shadow curling around your soul. I am recording this so someone knows how I died, how I succumbed to the horror that unfolded before me, and the grotesque secrets inscribed upon flesh that once belonged to a man untouched by madness. Know this, the truth I bear is an eldritch burden, and you may find your own fate entwined with mine. Sitting in this dimly lit office, furnished with antiquated tomes and the shadows of forgotten ideas, I am compelled to recount the curious circumstances that led to my fateful discovery. The letter arrived on an unremarkable Wednesday, its paper yellowed, the ink faded yet legible enough to evoke a sense of intrigue tinged with foreboding. It bore the seal of a once revered institution, the Miskatonic University, and within its lines lay an invitation, ostensibly benign, to examine a collection of documents unearthed from a recently demolished estate in Arkham. As I read the words, I felt an inexorable pull towards the prospect of unraveling the enigma of that forsaken place. An estate steeped in whispers of the arcane and the bizarre, a repository of knowledge that promised to illuminate the shadowed corners of mankind's understanding. Of course, the rational mind would dismiss the peculiar tales that accompanied the estate, a non-Euclidean architecture, rooms that seemed to defy the very laws of geometry, and a history marked by the descent of its former occupants into silence. Yet, as a scholar, I felt the stirrings of a challenge, a summons to investigate what so many had dismissed as mere folklore. I had regarded myself as a seeker of truth, unclouded by the delirium that colored the beliefs of lesser minds. I resolved to embark on this journey with skepticism as my shield, believing that knowledge, however arcane, could be wrested from the clutches of superstition. Little did I know that the very act of probing into that which should remain undisturbed would kindle a flame of curiosity that would consume me utterly. The day of my departure dawned with an unusual stillness, as if the very air conspired against the notion of travel. I found myself ensconced within a modest carriage, its wheels creaking ominously as we traversed the winding roads leading away from the familiar embrace of civilization. The landscape transformed with each turn, the manicured lawns and bustling towns diminished into realms of untamed wilderness, where nature's grip tightened with an unsettling tenacity. As I neared Arkham, the weather shifted. An oppressive fog unfurled like a shroud, enshrouding the remnants of humanity in an ethereal pallor. The trees, gnarled and twisted, stood sentinel along the path, their branches weaving grotesque patterns against an overcast sky that felt unyielding in its bleakness. The sun, a mere whisper of its former brilliance, struggled to penetrate the thick mist, casting an otherworldly dimness that seemed to warp time itself. Upon arriving at the estate, an unsettling chill coursed through me, the air laden with the scent of decay and the whispers of ages long past. The structure loomed before me, an eldritch testament to a forgotten era, its cyclopean walls marred by the erosion of time. I could not help but notice the peculiar angle at which the edifice stood, an imperceptible shift that distorted the familiar geometry of architecture. The entrance yawned wide, revealing a threshold that beckoned with an allure both captivating and horrifying. As I stepped inside, the silence enveloped me. Not the comfortable silence of solitude, but a deep, resonant hush that felt as though it had been steeped in centuries of untold secrets. Dust motes danced in the scant light that filtered through grimy windows, their movements almost sentient, as if they were the remnants of lost souls trapped in the very fabric of the estate. A cold draft sighed through the corridors, whispering forgotten names and fragments of stories that lingered on the cusp of memory. My heart raced with a mixture of trepidation and exhilaration. The promise of knowledge lay before me, yet the uncanny distortions of this place hinted at deeper, more profound horrors waiting just beyond the veil of understanding. Unbeknownst to me, I was a mere intruder wandering into the sanctum of that which should remain undisturbed, and the shadows of the past were already stirring, ready to ensnare a mind too eager for answers. The floorboards creaked beneath my weight, each sound echoing mournfully through the cavernous expanse, as if lamenting my intrusion. I felt the very air grow staler with each step, suffocating my senses, thick with a miasma of mildew and something more sinister, an acrid scent that clawed at the back of my throat, reminiscent of burnt offerings to nameless deities. The shadows writhed at the periphery of my vision, possessing an insidious life of their own. As I ventured deeper into the heart of the estate, the walls seemed to bend and twist in unnatural angles, warping my perception, as though the very architecture conspired to confound my rationality. I shuddered, for beyond the threshold of reason lay the abyss of madness, and my heart thudded a frantic cadence of foreboding. It was then that I noticed, emerging from the gloom, a door, its surface engraved with indecipherable runes that pulsated with a faint, sickly glow. The air around it shimmered, an unsettling distortion that made my skin crawl, as though the fabric of reality rippled under the weight of its existence. Compelled by a force I could neither understand nor resist, I approached. My fingers, trembling with a mixture of dread and reverence, traced the grotesque carvings. They felt alive and warm beneath my touch, throbbing in time with a heartbeat that resonated from beyond the door. I recalled the cryptic words of the mad scholar whose writings had led me here, the warnings cloaked in riddles, obscured by the fog of his own descent into lunacy. There lies the gate to the ineffable, he had scrawled, beyond which no sane mind may tread. Yet, the allure of forbidden knowledge tugged at my very essence, a siren call that drowned out the remnants of caution. I grasped the tarnished handle, its coolness biting against my palm, and turned it slowly. The door creaked open, revealing a void that swallowed the feeble light emanating from within the corridors of the estate. The darkness beyond was an abyssal realm, filled with a silence so profound it gnawed at the edges of my sanity. With a deep breath that tasted of decay and desperation, I stepped forward. Instantly, the air thickened, a palpable weight that pressed against my chest, as if the very cosmos conspired to crush my spirit. The space beyond the threshold defied the laws of geometry. The walls undulated in non-Euclidean rhythms, and I felt my mind warping in response, grappling with the indescribable horror that lay before me. In the center of this otherworldly chamber, a pedestal rose from the shadow, on which rested a tome bound in an iridescent skin that shimmered with hues of deep ocean blue and sickly green. I could hardly comprehend the contours of its surface, lines of script slithering like serpents, promising revelations that should remain unspoken. As I reached for it, the air crackled, and a cacophony of whispers filled my ears, voices that spoke in tongues lost to mankind, echoing secrets of the universe's creation and its inevitable decay. A sudden chill swept through me, coursing like ice in my veins, as I realized I was not alone. From the corners of the chamber, shadows coalesced into indistinct forms, their mouths moving in a grotesque mimicry of speech, yet no sound emerged. They were the manifestations of those who had sought to know what should never be known, their hollow eyes gazing upon me with a mixture of envy and despair. It dawned upon me in that horrific instant that I stood on the precipice of an unfathomable abyss, a mere vessel for the ancient knowledge that would unravel my very soul. My heart raced, the primal instinct to flee battling against the insatiable curiosity that clawed at my psyche. Yet, in that eldritch moment, I understood. The knowledge I coveted was not a treasure, but a curse, a key to the madness that awaited beyond the veil of normality. As the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar, I realized with a heart-stopping clarity that my fate was sealed. The tome pulsed with a malevolent life of its own, a siren song that promised understanding but delivered only ruin. The shadows surged forward, and I was enveloped in darkness, a maelstrom of despair, as I teetered on the edge of irrevocable insanity, lost in the depths of the Eldritch Manuscript of Inscription. The shadows pressed closer, their amorphous bodies writhing and swirling in a grotesque dance of hunger and despair. I felt the cold tendrils of their existence wrap around my limbs, slick with an unnameable ichor that smelled of rotting flesh and ancient tombs. Each pulse of the tome sent vibrations through the air, resonating with the whispers that now coalesced into a chaotic symphony of dread. They spoke of worlds unbirthed, of celestial horrors lurking in the dark corners of the universe, beyond the feeble grasp of human comprehension. In a burst of instinctual terror, I struggled against the encroaching darkness, but it clung to me with tenacious resolve, a living shroud that threatened to suffocate the last vestiges of my sanity. The very fabric of the room warped before my eyes, the angles of the walls fracturing into impossible shapes, bending reality into a non-Euclidean nightmare that skewed my perception. The floor slithered beneath my feet, a writhing mass that seemed intent on swallowing me whole, its surface slick and wet like an unholy tide. An insistent pounding filled my ears, the heartbeat of the cosmos, a dreadful reminder of the insignificance of my existence. I staggered backward, tripping over the grotesque forms sprawled upon the floor. Lost souls, perhaps, who had ventured too far into the abyss, their bodies twisted in eternal agony, mouths agape in silent screams. The air was perfumed with the scent of decay, mingling with the metallic tang of blood, a miasma that threatened to overwhelm my senses. Suddenly, a sound broke through the cacophony, a squelching noise, wet and heavy, as if something had taken form in the shadows. I turned, heart racing, to behold a figure emerging, grotesque and warped, its limbs elongated and sinewy, adorned with a skin that shimmered like the surface of a disturbed pond. Each step it took sent ripples through the very air, distorting my vision, and the agony of its existence resonated within me, a palpable despair that clawed at the edges of my mind. The creature's face, if one could dare call it such, was a tapestry of eyes, each reflecting a different fragment of the abyss, a kaleidoscope of madness that threatened to pull my soul into the void. I was enraptured and horrified, my sanity teetering on the precipice, as I beheld the terrible beauty of its existence. It opened its maw, a cavernous void from which spilled a soundless wail, reverberating through my very bones, summoning forth the deep-seated terror that lurked within the recesses of my heart. As the shadows coiled tighter, I felt the tome call to me, its pull growing irresistible, a gravity that transcended the physical. My thoughts fractured, splintering like glass, as I understood the futility of my resistance. The knowledge contained within that cursed text was not merely a key, it was a gateway to a fate worse than death, a descent into the unknown, where even hope could not follow. In that moment of despair, as the figure drew closer and the whispers crescendoed into a frenzied clamor, I grasped the tome with trembling hands, its surface warm and live, and I felt the weight of eons pressing down upon me. I had become the vessel for an ancient truth, one that would bind me to this horror for all eternity. The shadows roared with delight, their hunger satiated as I surrendered to the madness, the darkness enveloping me, erasing the last remnants of my identity. And in the depths of that abyss, I became one with the whispers, one with the tomes that spoke of the cosmic horror that awaited beyond the veil, where no light nor reason could penetrate. I was lost, utterly consumed by the insatiable law of knowledge that had revealed the ultimate truth. There is no escape from the shadows of eternity, no reprieve from the gnawing emptiness that is the universe. Thus I drift into a void of despair, a fragment of a shattered existence, forever entwined with the Eldritch Manuscript of Inscription, my sanity a mere echo in the vast, uncaring cosmos. In that terrible convergence of thought and flesh, I sensed the dark geometry of existence shifting around me, fracturing the very fabric of reality with each pulse of that wretched heartbeat. The illumination, if it could be called such, was an oily shimmer casting grotesque silhouettes upon the walls, each angle bending and warping beyond the limits of comprehension. Shapes crawled through the periphery of my vision, non-Euclidean forms that twisted in and out of alignment, as if the essence of space itself had been contorted by the creature's mere presence. As I surrendered further into the abyss, I could feel the dark whispers of the manuscript thrumming within me, urging me to behold the eldritch truths that lay before my shattered consciousness. The air thickened with the stench of ancient rot, a fetid amalgamation of decomposing matter, and the metallic tang of despair which clung to my skin like a vice, constricting my breath. With every inhalation, I tasted the decay of existential dread, a reminder of the madness that lurked within the writhing depths of my newfound reality. The creature before me surged with an unfathomable grace, its form an abomination of sinew and twisted bone, each elongated appendage dripping with a viscous substance that pooled beneath it, reflecting the shadows in maddening patterns. Its skin shimmered with an iridescent quality, a chaotic tapestry of colors that seemed to shift and writhe, defying the laws of nature and sanity alike. As it moved, the very geometry of its being flayed my senses, inducing vertigo that threatened to plunge me into an endless spiral of despair. In that moment, the creature's multitude of eyes twinkled with a malevolence that transcended mere malice. They were windows into the void, each gaze revealing a fragment of the ultimate truth, a kaleidoscope of horrors that spoke of the infinite, the unnameable, the abysmal. I could feel my mind fracturing beneath the weight of such knowledge, my very essence tearing apart at the seams, as the creature drew closer, its wet footsteps echoing with a dreadful finality. It reached a grotesque appendage toward me, an invitation wrapped in the guise of a curse, and I understood, in the depths of my unraveling sanity, that the manuscript had not merely revealed a truth. It was an insatiable hunger, a conduit to the unrelenting void that desired to consume all that I was. The whispers crescendoed into a tempest, an unholy chorus heralding my demise, as the creature's maw gaped wide, revealing an abyss that pulsed with the very essence of existence and non-existence alike. The moment stretched into infinity, a tormenting embrace, as I felt myself teetering on the threshold between worlds. I was a mere mote of dust in the cosmic expanse, a fleeting thought in the mind of a slumbering god. In that moment of despair, I realized I was not only a witness to the eldritch truths, but also a participant in the unfathomable tapestry of chaos. My being was to become a fragment, a whisper in the eldritch manuscript of inscription, as the creature's essence melded with mine, erasing the remnants of my identity, leaving behind only the echo of a soul forever entwined with the darkness. And so, I drift deeper into the void, ensnared in a symphony of madness, where the boundaries of self dissolve like mist under the unrelenting gaze of cosmic horror. I am nothing, an eternal witness to an unfathomable truth, an echo of existence in a universe that cares not for the fragile flicker of hope or the desperate cries of its denizens. I have become one with the whispers, and there is no salvation from the abyss that lies beyond. I feel my thoughts unraveling like a frayed tapestry, each thread of sanity slipping further into the chasm of despair. The creature's presence reverberates through the very marrow of my bones, a visceral reminder of the unfathomable horror I have dared to comprehend. It hovers on the precipice of my perception, a grotesque silhouette that defies not only the laws of physics, but the very fabric of existence itself. With each fleeting glance, I am confronted by an assortment of eyes swollen and glistening with a viscous fluid that reflects my own terror, a mirror into the abyss that I cannot escape. The wet squelch of its appendages upon the damp earth sends tremors of dread coursing through me, amplifying the claustrophobic reality of this wretched sanctuary. I am ensconced within the meager confines of my safe room, a fragile bulwark against the encroaching void, yet I sense the walls themselves trembling under the weight of its presence. With each heartbeat, I can feel the ancient manuscript's malevolent whispers growing louder, as if the very air around me is filled with the cacophony of countless souls lost to the eternal dark. I clutch the remnants of my sanity, though I feel it slipping from my grasp like water through fingers. The pages of the Eldritch tome lay strewn across the floor, covered in the ichor of my own terror, the script shifting and writhing as if alive, each letter a tendril reaching out to ensnare me further into its maddening embrace. I dare not touch them, for I know that to do so would be to invite the very essence of that which I fear into my being. There exists a profound horror in knowing that I am but a vessel, a mere conduit through which this abominable knowledge flows. Then, as if sensing my plight, the creature draws closer, its multitude of eyes narrowing in hungry anticipation. The air thickens, becoming viscous like the substance it oozes, each inhalation a reminder of the ever-encroaching void. I can feel its breath, foul and acrid, washing over me in torrents, suffocating and invasive. The geometry of its form warps the very light around it, causing the room to ripple and swirl, distorting my perception until I question the very nature of reality itself. Suddenly, I am gripped by an excruciating pain, a searing pulse that radiates from my core as if my very essence is being twisted and reshaped. My voice falters, a croaking rasp escaping my lips that betrays the utter dread festering within. I can no longer articulate the horrors that inundate my mind. They flow like a cascading river of madness, overwhelming the remnants of my consciousness. I clutch my head in desperation, feeling the sinewy tendrils of transformation creeping through my flesh, reshaping me into something unrecognizable. In a fleeting moment of clarity, I realize that I am not merely a witness to this calamity. I am becoming part of it. My fingers twist and warp, elongating into ghastly shapes, and the reflection in the puddles of ichor below reveals a face that is no longer my own. The maddening chorus crescendos in my ears, a symphony of despair, heralding my transformation into an eternal harbinger of this cosmic dread. As I struggle against the tide of this inevitable metamorphosis, the door shudders violently, vibrating with the force of that which seeks to breach my fragile sanctuary. The creature's relentless approaches send tremors of terror coursing through me, each wet footfall echoing the inexorable truth. I am trapped in a nightmarish cycle, forever ensnared in the grip of the abyss. I am an unwilling acolyte of the unfathomable, forever changed and eternally haunted by the knowledge I have dared to comprehend. Madness swirls around me, a tempest of despair that suffocates the last vestiges of hope. I stand on the precipice of annihilation, knowing that the grip of the void is tightening, and soon I shall be released into the fathomless dark, a whisper lost in the annals of an eldritch manuscript that shall never be forgotten. Comment now. I dread the whispers of that manuscript.
Now tell me, what detail tested your sanity first? Drop it in the comments, then click the next video, because the veil opens even wider in our next descent into the mythos.